Hi, Matt. Thank you very much for having me. So my name is Ofer Vicus, and I'm the CEO of Aduro Clean Technologies. And Aduro developed a chemical recycling platform for plastic conversion. We have other applications that we're doing as well. We're converting heavy oil. We are into higher value crude. We're able to do the same for tires, waste tires. And in general, there is a lot of applications that we can turn through this chemical platform technology.
Brilliant. Ofer, thanks so much for coming on our platform. We did have a chance to speak before Christmas, and so I was intrigued by the technology and I wanted to understand a little bit more. So today we're going to run through just a few slides because it's a little bit technical and don't want to lose people. But at the same time, I do want to understand your business. Okay, so I'm going to start with the obvious question, the business you're passionate about. But the obvious question is, what's the problem that you're trying to solve?
In reality, society is using a lot of hydrocarbons, and those hydrocarbons, they're coming in different shapes and forms. But generally speaking, if they're long and heavy, they worth less. So plastic is a long one; it worth less. And if you make it shorter, then suddenly you increase its value. And not the shorter; you don't want to do it very, very shorter. But it means that also, if you do that, then you increase the value of something that otherwise you would not do it. You wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. It's really, really hard to do it. It's required a lot of energy, a lot of resources. And so the technology that we develop basically take long, hard, long molecular hydrocarbons, make them shorter. Some of them becomes fuel, like energy, and then you can use them. That is in the case of bitumen, for example. And some of them become some kind of a form of wax, of material that you can reuse again. So creating from plastic, reversing it back into some kind of a liquid for which you can create new plastic. So it's about circularity. It's about better operation to the environment, better activity or more friendly activity towards the environment. It's about reuse of material, and it's about doing it in such way that is very different to what others have been doing so far. That's create higher yield, lower energy, maybe able to work with a little bit more contaminated material, have a lot of configuration, so much more flexibility. And hence, as you do that, you have much more options to work in your markets.
Right. Recycling. I'm going to recycling. You recycle to much more basic level. It's a little bit more technical than your standards of recycling story, which is what I like. So throw us some of the technical phrases that some of the people who really like to get into the detail would understand, because we've talked previously about hydrochemolytic plastics, right?
Yes.
What does it mean?
Are we talking about recycling, just focusing on recycling?
Let's start with that, something that people understand. Sure.
Because we can speak a little bit about the platform if you want, but we'll talk about recycling immediately. Yeah. So basically, over the years have been developed, many approaches have been developed to deal with plastic waste. There's a lot of it out there. Basically, the one problem that everyone knows is just so cheap. So it's accumulate a lot of negative cost. And so you have to transport it, you have to sort it, you have to do all kinds of things. The basic, I'll say approaches that have been developed over the years are the one that you see from left to right, the thermolysis, the solvent applications, and the mechanical solvation, if you will. Those are the main approaches that have been out there developed in order to convert or reuse or repurpose waste plastic. When we're talking about the left side of it, it's basically some kind of a heat form of breaking down of the molecules. And if you're breaking material, you have to fix it a little bit. So there's a little bit of penalties there. When you're talking about the solvolysis, it's basically a niche market. So think of material that goes into a pot, responds very well to some kind of a solvent. You can extract it, but really it's not mass production of things. And the mechanical approach is really the first approach everyone needs to start with, but it's limited to a certain type of material. So basically regenerating. It doesn't do anything to the material apart from cleaning it and regenerating it. So those were the approach, at the top level that you see. So first and foremost, Aduro is promoting another approach after many, many years. This is a big thing. And we've been talking about it with many scientists, Matt. Aduro is promoting a new approach, a fourth leg, if you will, that seems to be very, very promising. Now, this approach is right now has really strong advantages to the thermolysis, to the area that you see on the left. And basically, while most of the technologies on the left required some kind of a centralized location, some kind of a really strong sorting mechanism, and they have to take care later in the post-processing, they have to take later they have to treat the material. The technology that we are promoting is operating at a lower energy, is able to operate, with a little bit more contaminated material. It's producing higher yield and higher value, higher quality of material. And basically that means that you can operate in a smaller scale, somewhere also in remote area, or sometimes in a centralized area. Depends how you want to work, but it produces a lot of configurability that now that it was not there when you're talking about the technology on the left. Basically, they are somewhat of limited in their chemical operation, and for that reason they are also limited in the economical operation, and that's okay. They can work. There's a lot of room in plastic recycling to operate. It's just that we have a little bit more options to operate when we want to.
Right. So you've got a lot of flexibility in terms of the way that people can configure it. Okay. So you've got thermolysis, solvolysis, and solvation and chemolysis.
Yes, that's a mechanical approach.
Right. So there's lots of companies, there's lots of options out there at the moment. And, that is all competition. Whether yours is better than theirs or not, that's all competition. So you've got to work out as a business where you think that you want to enter the market and grow. So tell me about how you're coming at this. Obviously, I guess there's an education around, what your product is.
Yeah, this is a really wonderful question, because you see, for many of them, we don't consider them as a competitor. So let me just explain that, and then we can operate in areas that they simply cannot operate. So those technologies are limited in one way or the other, but they get other material that comes to them. So, for example, on the thermolysis, there is a lot of high rejection of material because they get the best of the best. They're looking for the best of the best of material. And by the way, when they do that, price of the feedstock jump up. And so they're not just that they are rejecting, but also they have to pay quite a lot of money towards the feedstock that they want. Well, Aduro can join in and just basically work with them and take everything that is rejected. Not everything, but a lot of that is rejected. So we don't really see them as a competitors in many ways. We see them as somewhat of an integrated. Plus, if they have to pay a lot of money for their feedstock, because imagine let's say in Europe, some of those organizations are working really in the same regions, and of course they have demand for the same feedstock. Suddenly you have an inflation of the price. Aduro is a way out for that. Aduro is basically a technology that allows them to operate on a lower level value. So that is at the first point. The other point that I want to say, how we differentiate ourselves in the market, from them, is that we are capable of working today in areas that they are not, it's not their natural habitat, if you will. So I'm differentiating between high regulated environment, more like Europe and North America, but it's also India, Latin America. Although they're coming into, and making higher regulations, there's a lot of ground that there's not lots of encouragement for these guys to work in. And Aduro can do things in a smaller scale, much more flexible operations. So imagine us working in those territories. Those are green field for us at this point of time.
So that's kind of interesting, actually. So, because I always look at both ends of the equation, the cost equation, that is. Obviously, expensive feedstocks is prohibitive. If you can operate with lower feedstock material, that's great. But feedstock has a way of kind of catching up. At some point, people readjust pricing there. So it's a very difficult thing to control that. You coming in and offering them more upside in terms of the output, the product output, that's the bit that kind of interests me in the market that can feed into. Whether you're doing it as a joint venture or you're doing it separately, or that's down to you, and depending on which jurisdictions you're operating in. So how can we get to the bit where you think you need to focus in terms of how you make money for your company now, or how you finance your company moving forward?
Yes. So in general, we are a licensing-based model. So we don't approach most of the technology that you see here are promoting a project base. So they have to fund the project. So they gear in behind a center or a location. They build all their hardware there. They make this offtake agreement. That's okay. We are promoting a licensing agreement. So we are engaging with the organizations that already have the feedstock, that already knows, they have the land, they have the space, but really are looking for a superb technology to work with. And I think this is the opportunity for us. So when we're working with these guys, what we do initially, we are inviting them to what we call, we created this customer engagement program where we call into those organizations and we do some experiments, live experiments. Normally they're paying for that. And from that point, it's easy for them to envision the technology's superiority, if you will. And then it's also it's easy for them to envision how they can migrate and turn the technology into their site. That is when you're talking about, I'll say, the large organizations. And over last year, Matt, we've been bombarded and really got really good tractions with large organizations approaching us and talking and asking to understand what is it we have been doing. And some of them are Fortune 500, some of them are lesser, but all of them are interested in the licensing. They're not interested in us, they're interested in the technology. A recent achievement that we had, we've been successfully engaged and selected by Shell Game Changer to be tested. And we have an ongoing project right now with Shell Game Changer over a year, which is 6 phases, which is doing exactly what I just mentioned. Otherwise, we're talking to those organizations, and we offer small projects just to build our pipeline of customer pipeline. That as they walk around and they operate, they see the performance, but they also can envision how to migrate and take on the technology.
Right. So I'm interested in the money part of business always. And I know this is kind of early days, but so it's an intellectual property and licensing model. So you don't have kind of big CapEx outlays,
right.
But you kind of need to establish yourselves in a way too. So what's the sell? All these people coming to you, what was the sell? Clearly they want to make more money for their business. So what are they seeing in you, which answers that question for them? How do I make more money?
Right. So the first and foremost is that the technology has a lot of capabilities to work in a low energy environment with a high contaminated material, producing higher value product. So that is the key in first and foremost. And so they are very much interested because it's a new science. They've never been tested before. They're very much interested in that type of understanding what is it we've been doing. Because, Matt, we did not have a website for 10 years. So the first time we had a social media footprint was 2 years ago when we went public. Before that, there was no reason to anyone to know what we've been doing. We're only operating publicly for the last 2 years, and it was an awesome journey. Second, what you see here in front of you is basically the slide that somewhat speaks to the performance, the financial performance of the technology. So you can see on the left that we are operating on 8,500 tons a year, which is lesser than a pilot for most of the other peers technologies, first and foremost. So for other technologies, a 30,000 tons per year operation is considered to be a pilot. Most of them are looking to do operation at 100, 200, 300,000 tons. So big money, big spend. On the left, you see the value of the capital cost that is required. In the middle, you can see the type of product. Basically, we're producing liquid product that we can turn, it has a commodity market price and market value. And on the right, you can see, a little bit what is the payback, what's the gross margin to the guys that will license this, and how much Aduro is looking into it. And Matt, the other item that is really, really exciting here for the people is the fact that you can scale it up. So this is such a small unit, and if you want a larger project, you just stack them all together. So you put train reactors in a row, if you will, and you can do projects that start small, and if you're happy, they can increase fairly quickly. And we will be, in that sense, more efficient than many of the peers' technologies. And our, gross margin is, you can see it. It's quite satisfying, but it has this de-risking of starting small and moving back, upwards, where In many of the cases, most of those organizations needs to do something centralized. They have to invest a lot of money. There's a starting point out there where we're de-risking the whole process.
Right. So, okay, but this is your technology, but their balance sheet, right? So the kind of CapEx component for them is significant. You talk about, sort of 6 to 6.5 year payback typically.
Yeah.
There. So which, that's kind of on the outer reaches of, reasonable returns. So what's the drivers for them? Or is this like, who are your customers?
I can understand your questions.
And because there's a kind of green component to it, and recycling is great. People are going to love it, but also people need to look at the bottom line. So again, the sale process there is, how long does it take to kind of convert these guys into customers, and what actually gets them over the line?
So there's a whole lot in what you've been asking, so I'll try to answer. This is a very new science. It's never been tested before. And for that reason, people that have to put a lot of money there has to, we came up with what we call customer engagement program, and we offer them a session that costs a few $100,000s. We'll test, you'll test case your feedstock. We'll, not just that, we'll customize our solution to yours because we have a lot of configuration. We understand what is your need in the territory, and we move on. So that's the sales cycle. Beyond that, I'll say that the large organization, Matt, are not interested in 10,000 tons per year operation. They're interested in hundreds of thousands of tons per year of operation. So they see us as a way to provide that, but in a scale-up mode, in a way that will de-risk the whole operation. Otherwise, you just have to decide, okay, I have to put $500 million. This is the offtake agreement that we have to do. This is the technologies that we have to take. And, maybe nobody will be around us to inflate the price of the feedstock. So we take away all of that. Project, basically, to build a project is about a year. On commercial phase, it's just about the lead, it's the engineering, the commissioning, but the size of the project could be fairly large. So while I'm speaking about, maybe 10,000 tons a year as a commercial unit, we easily could take 5 of those or 6 of those and build 100, 200,000 tons. And this is the solution that we are promoting to the big organization, to the large organizations. The smaller organization, if you imagine a factory that has a lot of waste, rather than take the waste and send it into the landfill or pay for it, some penalties, we can start small in the way I just described, and we can help this organization making some money out of this waste while avoiding sending it to the landfill. So rather than simply increasing the pressure on the landfill, just making some money right there. When we do those things, Matt, we are saving a lot of the negative costs associated with the activity that is related to plastic waste.
This is what I'm going for. Ofer. This is the bit that intrigues me. Okay, because the kind of return profile and the gross margin for your licensee and yourselves is kind of interesting. But there's a bigger problem being solved, and I wonder where that's being driven from, because your licensee will have a client of their own. They're going to want to get their funding in place. They're going to need contracts in place, and it could be, from off-taker agreements. It could be from, municipal tips with all of the big waste which goes there. If you're able to kind of extract slightly more value, that's great. If you're able to, but I guess my concern is if there's an incumbent technology or an incumbent infrastructure, how do you fit into that scenario versus a completely, greenfield or brownfield, license?
Yeah, and this is again excellent approach. So I mentioned, Matt, at the beginning. So there are technologies that are already out there operating, and they are rejecting a lot of material. And so we are basically taking a lot of material that is rejected. So imagine an operation that already decided on some kind of an operation, but they're rejecting a lot of materials. We can take on this material and help them making more money. That's basically, so it's not all about greenfield. Also, the space is fairly large. So there's hundreds and hundreds of millions of tons of plastic waste all over the world. Only 5-6% of it is really being repurposed or recycled. And we're talking globally, not locally in Europe or in North America. And so the market is huge for everyone. And for us, it's definitely a big addressable market because we have a little bit more capabilities than the others. So we're not talking all about a green field. We're talking about working with other organizations, but when we talk about our customers, our main customers, normally what we see is a customer that is interested in a superior performance. And that's what we represent.
Right. And where, give me an example of what that looks like. Because like I say, there's all of these incumbents with their various technology, and inertia is such a hard thing. They say, well, we've kind of got a solution. It's good enough. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to go to people and say, well, look, good enough is not good enough anymore. You need to remove more of this landfill and stop so much going to landfill. We can recover what? An extra 20%, an extra 10%, an extra 5%, but the value of that is significant. I mean, again, I'm interested in the sales message to see if we get me over the line.
So our standard yield of let's say of a kilo of material or a ton of material that we produce is about 90% of material that is fungible and worth more. So only 10% are left there. And this is something unheard of in the rest, with the rest of the market.
Well, what's normal look like? What are other people doing?
Normal roughly will look like 50, 60%. Wow. And there is a lot of energy that is associated with that. And, there'll be an organization that will argue, okay, we're creating higher yield, and we'll say, yes, you are, but you're spending a lot of capital costs on the pre-system and the pre-treatment and on the post-treatment, and then not all of it could go into repurposing. So we see different numbers when we're talking about repurposing of plastic, basically. We see also minimum footprint, environmental footprint. So if you're producing 90% of material, what happened to the remaining 10%? So 6% are gases, of which half of them could return as energy to the system. You see, very, very efficient system, very little amount of solid. So overall, the package is quite efficient. And now, if you put it somewhere, when it can operate in a small scale operation, then you're saving all the other costs that are immediately coming into you. So, the transportation.
Understood.
All of that.
Understood. So basically, you're saying to people, we can deconstruct these macromolecules better than anyone else and create products which have more value, with more total value as a result, and less costs further downstream. Right, so less impact on the environment in terms of landfill.
Yeah, and I know it's sometimes working against me. I always, when we say better than anyone else, each technology has its own characterization. We tend to work with them, or we tend to work, in a remote area where they're not even there. It's just nobody's there.
Okay. So that's interesting. I understand what you're trying to do, the problem you're trying to solve, which is always key. Do people want that problem solved? I guess the answer is yes. So your challenge.
Yes. And you should remember, Matt, that the world, around us, there's of the plastic waste that is out there, a lot of it is just simply end up in the landfill and in our water. Most of it, over 80% of it, is just not repurposed. There is a place in the world for hundreds of euros and the hundreds of all the rest. What most of the time, people are seeing is that they're working, side by side in the Western, more of development world. But what happens to the rest? Nothing is happening, and we are there to help.
Okay. So Aduro Clean Technologies, you've got a product which is you believe in, and you believe is more efficient, or is efficient at doing what it's doing, but we need all of the above. So that's a very good mantra, and that's very a good thing to say. There's room for everyone. And tell me about the challenges that you've got ahead. You've got to get more of these pilots, these tests going on. You've got to convert them into revenue. You've got to grow this business. So what's the plan for growing the business from here?
So what you see, Matt, is basically what we promised to. We're working in stages, and last year we promised our investors that we're going to put what we call machine in the ground and get customers to test it, because we argue that technology is so fantastic that we should have an organization that will help us commercialize it. So here you go. This year, what you see in this slide is basically some of the units that we are commissioning. On the right, it's the plastic unit, the continuous flow plastic unit, which is a demonstration unit that could be scaled up, but it's the first one that is a continuous flow. And on the left, you can see a unit that is part of the bitumen operation, which we can talk then. So we've been, delivering right to the letter in terms of our, I'll say, machines that we're putting in the ground. And then at the end of last year, we actually been successfully engaged with Shell Game Changer and with an energy company called Prospera. Mind you, we have another energy company, one of the largest in Alberta, but it's confidential and we can't talk about it. And so we're now adding, if you will, more and more organizations into our mix. So this year, our goal is to bring more of those partner engagements to work with us and to build our ton per day unit, where the other units were the smaller, maybe kilogram per hour. The goal for this year is to build up a continuous slope ton per day unit, but also add much more customers that will help us. And Matt, through this process, on one hand, we're building our customer engagement, but when we go and talk to an investor, we're thinking about the investors. And so we see ourselves working with such partners to help us commercialize the activity. We have a lot of non-diluted money that we're bringing in, such as the money that we brought on the right, from government grants. And so by the time we reach the investor and telling the investor, look, we're talking about, working in stages in order to build a commercial application, we already have some partners, much before that we are asking the money from the investments. And that is the concept. We're trying to align ourselves with however the investor, see us in order to secure his position. And it was very successful last year. And, it looks like this year is going to be a transformation again for us.
Well, look, Ofer, I just wanted people to hear this story because I quite like the technology and like what you're trying to do. But you're at that stage, as you say. You've got a lot of people sort of testing and talking, and you need to get them over the line. So this for you, it's get head down, get some of those contracts into some kind of commercial state where you start to understand what the revenues could look like, the time frame for those as well. But as it's
and I'll say, Matt, on the right, what you see is not a lot of project. We basically, if I talk to you about companies that are doing hundreds and thousands of tons, the licensing on the right with the 95 million is basically less than 400 tons of processing. So you can imagine we can sell to large organization 100, 200,000 tons of processing, and we'll be where we are. We actually feel this chart is quite conservative. And the years to come, the next 2-3 years, basically we are operating to build our customer engagement. And this is where we expect some small revenue from those customers. But again, those customers will move along into taking on larger projects. This is what we anticipate. And for that reason, I think don't look at the revenue, but look at the partners that we're bringing to work with us to mitigate the risk for you, the investor.
Right. So and just one last one, because again, the money always interests me. So with regards to those sort of contracts, how long are those contracts? Forget the size. The size will be the size of as you do more, you'll get more. But the contract terms are typically how long?
So standard, when everything is said and done, standard regular experiment program for a customer engagement program could take 3 or 4 months. Specifically with the Shell Game Changer, it's actually allocated over a year and it has 6 phases. So Shell has been, they know the market. They've been looking outside. They've seen our argument as much as, every technology out there. And we're working with them on phases where in each phase we have some deliverable to do. At the end of it, there is, of course, a commercial agreement. It is all confidential and we cannot disclose. I'll say for per customer or possible customer or partner, it will take 3 to 6 months, from which we are also anticipating to receive some revenue, minimum revenue.
Right, and how long does a contract typically last once they've kind of gone through the testing phase in the industry? I appreciate the terms are usually.
So those processing unit can live for 20, 30 years.
Wow.
So, and you can only, if you want, once you start it, it's actually, let's assume a customer will be happy with them, then you can envision that they could increase because we have small scale, right? You remember we can add 2 or 3 more. So a customer is happy what we've been doing. Next year he'll add another 3. He's happy. He's thinking about increasing his operation. He can add another 6.
Right.
And that flexibility answers to a lot of the risk mitigation for such customers.
Okay, so I guess where I'm going with this is I'm trying to work out if I'm creating a financial model, how do I value you? And if you've got a kind of got an annuity stream, which could be, you know, significant, like multi-decade, then that's kind of interesting.
Yes.
You kind of get valued more like a technology company at that point than, say, a mining operation or natural resource operation. So that's kind of interesting to understand. Look, Ofer,
and I recommend, this is fair point, and I recommend them to look at the brand that we're making effort to bring in. So they are not considering, you know, small scale operation. They're considering large scale commercial operation. So for them, you know, if we are being selected and if we are working with them over the long run, we're talking about, you know, the potential there is larger than what we see on the screen. So, and we want to bring more of those into the table.
Of course. Ofer, thank you so much for coming and sharing the technology with us. Really enjoyed that one. Exciting time for you. It'd be an exciting year for you, I think, in terms of trying to advance some of these contracts. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Fantastic year for us. I mean, we're looking forward. The team is hungry. He's ready. The units are just now in the commissioning phase. You know, we're moving in towards some customer engagement. We have some that are more advanced and some that are a lesser. I mean, very, very exciting year for us. Thank you very much for having me and looking forward.